Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself. Feeling ready to kick your sales into high gear? We're here to help. Check out our sales coaching and consulting services at predictablerevenue.com.
My card says, I build people-based businesses. So, and that's, I've done over 10 of those.
As opposed to robot-based businesses?
Yeah. As opposed to as opposed to not treating people the way they need to be treated. So I'm a firm believer that we all have an internal gift within us. And so, when I was at the age of 10, I fell and hit my head, and I was diagnosed as an epileptic. And so that was back in the days when nobody knew anything about epilepsy. But my big part of the story is that when we left I was in the hospital for about 5 days. And when we left the hospital, I was in the car with my mother, and I looked over at her, and she had this tear in her eye. And I said, "Mom, don't worry, it's going to be okay." Mm-hmm. And she said, "Well, Huey, I know it's going to be okay, but my concern is most people don't understand this disorder, mm-hmm. and you need just to make a promise to me." And I said, "What's that, Mom?" And she said, "Never let anybody hold you back, especially yourself." And what I really didn't realize at that time, and I said, "Of course, Mom, I'm never going to let anybody hold me back." Well, I didn't realize at the time that she was 100% correct. People didn't understand epilepsy. And so when I went to school, and, I was under all kinds of medication, it was really kind of a rough year, just trying to figure out what the medication would do and trying to play sports and do everything else. But what ended up happening at that time is that I really took it to heart from her. And I really believed that I wasn't going to let anybody hold me back. And what I also realized at the time, as far as mentoring, is that there were a lot of other people that had disorders or disabilities that were out there that I started to mentor and coach, at the same time, because I wanted to help them really figure out who they were. And so that was the path that I got started on. And then in the 9th grade, Colin, a teacher came to me and tried to put me into special needs. And I remember that like it was yesterday. I got on the bus, and I went home, and I was really upset. And I said, "Mom, this is what, this teacher tried to do." And she said, you can be anything you want to be. Just remember, never let anybody hold you back, especially yourself. But she did something that was really, at the time, I didn't realize. She said, "Well, what I want you to do, I want you to go upstairs, and I want you to just think about it. I want you to think about what you want. And I want you to think about what that teacher just said to you, because she was wrong. But I want you to think about, who you are." And so, and I did. And, I decided, I did not go into whatever the special needs school was. And I continued to just kind of push through school. And because of that, I had this badge of courage that I carried with me, because I wasn't going to let anybody hold me back. And now I went through all the kid stuff everybody else did. I was probably pretty goofy, but what really happened at the time, something happened at the time that I didn't even realize what my mother was doing until I was like in the age 60. Mm-hmm. But she was, I love sports books, and I love the underdog sports books. And she would, about once a week, she would come in, she would throw one of those books on my bed, and I just absorbed them. I thought I was going to, at one time, I wanted to be a sports writer, is what I thought back then. And, but it was all about the underdogs. And I just love that. And I love reading those books and finding, the underdog that's overcoming. And I just did that time and time again. What I didn't realize at the time is that she was feeding my mind. She was feeding, my paradigm was being built on overcoming adversity. And so it was really something that I really took and other people, whatever their disabilities were and what was going on. And eventually that teacher that wanted to send me to special needs, there was an opposite teacher. So I'm always talking about the law of polarity, that everything we do has an opposite. Well, I had an opposite teacher, a counselor that looked at me and said, Hugh, you can be anything you want to be. There's a college for everybody. So I went to college, and I started to learn how something else happened when I originally went to college, because I had ADHD. So ADHD and epilepsy were two things that probably, when teachers looked at me, that wasn't a great thing. But I started to learn. I met somebody there. I met a coach or a tutor that started to teach me how to learn. And at the time, to me, that was a pretty big deal, because I remember that guy, like it was today. If I could remember his name, I'd go give him a big hug, because he really changed, my whole academic side of it. But one thing that I realized is that there's this whole group of people out there today, and just even then, that somewhere along the line they've been held back. Whether they've been held their self back, or whether it was a teacher that told them they couldn't do something, or in some cases, Colin, a mom and a dad that had really terrible times, and and they got caught up in that, and then they get to a place that they're just stuck, and they're starting to believe the dialogue everybody else has told them. And what I realize is that there's this group out there, and they all have this gift. And so when I went to Radford University, I started a fraternity. I wanted to be a president, but I had transferred in, and nobody was going to let me be president because I wasn't going to be there long enough. So I started my own fraternity. But what I realized is, when I looked around at the landscape, I realized that most of those fraternities were in buckets. They were jocks and, all the different labels that were with it. And I made a decision that I was going to start a fraternity, but it was going to be a fraternity that we didn't put labels on people, that we just found people. And if they were good people, then we were going to give them opportunities to figure out where it is they wanted to go within the fraternity, but not only the fraternity, but where do they want to go with their careers. Mm-hmm. And so, something amazing happened. I went and got cards made up at, wherever the local place was, and I started knocking on doors. And I started telling this story of what we were trying to accomplish. By the end of that first year, we were almost twice the size of any other fraternity on that campus. By the second year, we were way above them. And then I made a decision that I wanted to that I really wanted to do something for the university. So I started the Greek Week Games, and we got the university together with the Greeks, and it was pretty amazing what we did. But the bottom line is that I found out then, and this is where it really goes into business. I learned how to lead then. I learned how to start something, a business, then being the fraternity. Mm-hmm. But I learned that it was really not about me, that it was about each one of these people. And that if I put them in a position So whatever the role they wanted, whatever, I helped them get there. And then if we were able to turn it into more of a team environment, which is what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also had looked at it like, hey, we're the underdogs. We're the new fraternity on campus. And then it became about something bigger than all of us, that we were doing something that was we were really making a difference on the campus, and not to mention that the money that we were giving away to the charities. So the whole thing just became bigger. And I didn't realize that was the model that I was creating, that I've created on these 10 companies that I've turned around. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say I didn't fail. I failed in sales the first couple times, and but I did what I realized is that there's nothing wrong with failure. But what I realized as I eventually found Sanders Sales and then Earl Nightingale, a guy named Larry Wilson, they were my guys. And so what happened is when I say failed, I was like middle of the pack, working as hard as I could work. And there wasn't much money coming in. I was living in Baltimore, Maryland. It was pretty expensive. I was living in a janitor's closet, which I actually really lived in because that's the only thing that I could afford at the time. And then I remember a pizza man coming to the door, and I went to go pay him, and I didn't have any money. The money was gone. And I was like, Hugh, you got to change. Mm-hmm. What I found at that time was that I found a group. It was a group of training, and I met with them. And I met with those guys, and I loved it. And they were talking about Earl Nightingale, and they were talking about Larry Wilson, and they were, it was just my place, but I had no money. So we go in, they pull me into the room, and they said, okay, this is what's going to cost. I said, guys, you don't understand. I couldn't afford the pizza man last night. And so what I did is I negotiated a deal to go out, and they said, if you can bring us in 2 clients, we'll give you 6 months worth of training for free. And within 2 weeks, I brought in a client. The client I brought in ended up being one of their largest clients that they had. But that 6 months was the most impactful 6 months that I'd ever been through. But what I really did is I found Earl Nightingale and, lead the field. And I bought his tapes, and I put it in the car, and I just listened to it. And then I listened to Larry Wilson. I guess he and Larry Wilson were big friends at one time. But what I did is whatever they told me to do, I made a decision to do it. So what I realized then, though, was that I wanted more. So within 1 year, I was the number one salesman in the company. And I was the number one salesman for 3 years. And it was, I just figured it out. I realized that if you're familiar with Larry Wilson, it was called the new way to sell. And that was that's what he considered consultative selling at the time. So I'd listened to his stuff, and then I listened to Earl Nightingale's stuff, and I just put it together. But one thing I realized is that I was doing it all the wrong way. Everything I was doing was a transaction, and I was working hard at the transaction side. But when I walked away, I didn't have a feeling that I was really accomplishing anything. So we were selling plumbing products. So, but when I realized that I could become a consultant, that I could have a different conversation, with my clients, and that I could pick the clients that I wanted, all of a sudden things started to change. And that's what really, moved me beyond, because now I became a part of the businesses that I was doing business with. So much, Colin, that I don't know, I was a pretty young guy back then, and all the 50-year-olders, they were just following me around everywhere I went. Because, and they would walk in, and I would do whatever I would do, and then they would walk in and say, whatever Hornsby gave you, I'll give you an extra 5. But it was never about the extra 5. It was always about, what is the revenue? How can I help create more revenue for you?
Mm-hmm.
And really starting to understand at the time that the biggest thing that I could do is to help that person that was in front of me meet whatever the goals were that they had. And it really changed things. Moved shortly after that, went into management, and that was a disaster. Sales to management, and with a terrible, with a regional manager that was just, or a national sales manager that was terrible. But it was then I also started to learn that, whatever I knew in sales, being the number one sales guy, I had to learn something different about, leadership. And so where most people probably would have turned around, I started telling myself, a friend of mine always says, Hugh, the biggest story that we can tell is the story that we tell ourselves. And so I started telling myself a different story. It's like, you can do this. You need to take a look at what you did, and how can you look at the people that are reporting to you now and add value back into them. And what happened is that I took a step back, and I came up with this philosophy that I built, and it's a people-based business philosophy. And then what I realized is that my job was to make them listen to them and figure out who they were, and then put me in a position to help them become better at what they wanted. And what I realized at the time, at that time, was most people were doing it all wrong. They were really all about the numbers. They were all about the report card. And
mm-hmm.
and what I realized is that if I could help each one of those people figure out where it is they wanted to go, and I could help them get there, and then I could tie whatever it is their personal goals were to our goals, and then put them in a position to become something bigger than themselves, because that's, to me, is the biggest thing. So
mm-hmm.
my biggest thing, and the success that I've had recently over the last years, has been, I've been able to find people that were stuck and have a conversation with them. Now, I'm a big Think and Grow Rich guy. So, having a burning desire, my dad used to say, you can't coach desire, but
mm-hmm.
figuring out what it is that they want, and finding those people to say, okay, you know what, I believe in you, so I'm going to give you a shot. But the other part of it that I needed to do was to make sure that they're willing to invest in themselves. And if they were willing to invest in themselves, then I would be willing to invest in them. And then what I've been able to do is to put these teams together. And basically, the other part of that is that you have to make a decision that this is big, much bigger than yourself. And then after that, what I would do is I would take the non-competes off of my group. And I understand that's not for everybody to do, but that's what I did, because I wanted to make a commitment to them that if they had an opportunity that was bigger than what we could give them, I wanted to take it. And even if it was in the industry that we were in, I was good with that, because I wanted to support that industry. And because we did that, the next thing we did is that, I don't know if you've ever heard of Chet Holmes,
mm-hmm.
but I read Chet Holmes' book, and I broke it down. And then what I did with that, Ted Miller is a good friend of mine, and Ted introduced me to Chet Holmes. He actually coached me, but I broke it down. And then when COVID happened just recently, what happened is that I went to 5 days of training, which Chet always said you need to do 5 days of training anyway. Well, I did 3 days of training, but we went to 5 days of training.
Mm-hmm.
And so I brought these people in, I hired them off lawnmowers, one of them was in prison 14 years ago. That's kind of extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And he's my number one salesman in the company now. And, finished carpenter. And what I did is I realized that our industry was really aging out, and there was an opportunity to bring other people in. And, when I went to a Southern wholesalers meeting and I was on a board, and everybody was saying, we can't hire people. We just can't hire people. Mm-hmm. And they would come back and they got to me, and I was a little disgusted with what everybody was saying, because they were just a bunch of old guys. And even if they weren't old, they acted old. And I said, well, I have a question. And they said, what's that? And I said, I think, are you having all the wrong conversations? And are you talking to all the wrong people? Are we looking in the wrong places? And they looked at me, what are you talking about, Hornsby? And I said, I think you're having the wrong conversation, because this is an incredible industry and this is an incredible place. And you guys are the ones that can make the difference with this next generation coming in. And I said, what's the conversation that you're having? Change the conversation and you will start to get people. With Everflow, that's what I did. So I ended up going to Everflow Supplies. They were a New York, New Jersey company, very unique, out of New York City. And they want to build the company outside of the United States. I mean, out of New Jersey, New York, into the United States. And I sat down with the owner. He was like 40 years old. And I said, okay, you built this company from zero to 65 million in 20 years. I said, that's impressive.
It's pretty great.
He said, but I don't know how to build it outside the U.S. He was a Hasidic Jewish guy from New York City. And he felt like that he was looked at in a very different way. Absolutely a great guy. And I said, I tell you what, if we could integrate what you do, and we integrate what I do. I'm the Christian from Virginia. But if we can integrate those two things, and you give me the opportunity to go out and start to hire people, and you let me hire the people that I want to hire, I have this vision of what I want to not only do for the industry, but what I can do for your company, but what we can do for these people. Mm-hmm. And that was our vision. He said, no. He told me later that he thought I was going to make it about 6 months and he was going to, get rid of me. But that didn't happen. What happened is that, I cleaned out as much of the toxic people that were in there. I got rid of them. And then I started looking for people. And I, some of them were in the industry, some of them weren't, but we started hiring people, and they were people that had been stuck and people that had just gone through different things in life. And we brought them in, and we started telling the story of what we were doing. And then COVID happened. And then COVID happened, and most of the people that we were competing with were manufacturers' reps, and they were old guys. And so the old guys decided just to go ahead and sit on the couch. And so we hit our CRM, and I said, guys, here it is. I remember like it was yesterday when they shut down, they shut down the United States. And here I was. I had just put in like 16 people. I'm like, man, I told my wife, I'm like, I can't let these people go. And so I woke up in the middle of the night, Colin, and I said, we're not going to let these people go. We're going to change this. So the next morning, I had a Zoom meeting, and I said, all right, guys, this is what's going on. Now, I'm going to give you an opportunity of whether you want to stay or whether you want to go. I said, but I'm going to tell you, if you're going to stay, we're going to change this world. But you're going to have to work harder. You're going to have to listen to me, and we're going to build something that nobody else knows that we can build. And out of that, there were 2 that left. One wanted to go kayaking, and the other one, and I was like, okay, you're good. You're good. And then I talked to the team, and I said, we're going to do 5 days worth of training. You're going to hit the CRM like you've never hit it before. And you're going to make the phone calls that you've never made before. And you're going to tell a different story about Everflow because nobody knows who you are. And you're going to hit it, and you're going to figure out what it is that they want. And so, I think we made 1,000 phone calls that day. And we started making phone call after phone call after phone call. And then I decided that on Wednesdays, we needed to do a leadership Wednesday. And there was this guy named Larry Levine that sent me his book. And I picked up the phone and called him. And I said, Larry, my name's Hugh Hornsby. This is what I'm doing. I've got this leadership Wednesday event, and I want you to be a part of it. And so we started that. We started bringing in the Larry Levines of the world and the Jim Packards of the world and all these other people that had sent me their books. Because what I wanted them to do is to realize that they needed to feel comfortable having conversations with executives. It's a different conversation. But then what I told the Larry Levines of the world is, I don't want to hear how successful you are right now. Jim Packard, I had so many people, and I said, I want you to tell your story from when it was really hard. I want you to tell your story about what you needed to do differently than everybody else. And that's what they started to do. And I said, after you do that, if you want to say, okay, this is what I'm doing now, but the bottom line is, I want these people to know that you didn't get to where you are right now without having to go in with the blood, the sweats, and the tears. And I want you to have conversations with them on what that looked like. And the great thing, Colin, is they started telling about when, they had, Larry told about when he got fired, and, Jim Packard told about his route, selling newspapers, and then, and it went on and on. And that's how I really got connected to Mark Hunter and all these people, because I'd have them come on and have them tell their stories. But what was really great at that time is that we, a lot of people, you hear a lot about leadership. Leadership is bringing people together. Leadership is not about me. It's about each individual. And what I was able to do, I was getting to know them, and I was encouraging them, and they were starting to really believe in themselves. And then something else happened, this thing called supply chain the next year. And because we'd made all those calls and we'd done all that work up front, and we'd used our CRM, and we were just outpacing, people were starting to say, who in the heck is this Everflow company? And Hugh Hornsby, they gave me way too much credit for it. But the bottom line is, people were just starting to ask the questions, where are you guys coming from? Because I didn't realize it when I took this job, is that the reputation that Everflow had was not very good. It was terrible. But we started to change the way that we were looked at. And then when supply chain happened, I had this vision. And if you go in and you read Chet's book about information-based marketing, so I took that and I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I got my COO, who knew all the stuff about supply chain, and I said, I'm going to start calling the boards and have these people have us come on and have conversations about what's really going on with supply chain. I'm not going to try to sell them anything. I just want them to know we know what's going on with the supply chain. And so the largest companies were having me going into their board meetings, and I'd bring my COO and we would talk about, this is what's going on with supply chain. This is where it is. This is the vision that we see. So all of a sudden, what we were able to do is we were able to totally change the way that we were looked, because now we became the thought leaders of the industry. Mm-hmm. And it was a pretty cool thing. Because of that, we still were doing the meetings. We were making huge progress. We built this company from 65 million to 155 million in 3.5 years. For us, that was a pretty big deal. But that's really
pretty hard to triple a company that size.
Yeah, and it's also hard once you triple it. Now you got to catch up with everything else that's there. So, we've gone through some of those challenges as well. But what's really been great about it was that, that couldn't have been done with me, my CEO. We couldn't have done that by ourselves. But what we really did is we started to build a brand for Everflow. But what each one of those people did is that they started building a brand for themselves. And it was when I say the numbers, yeah, it makes me feel really good about it. But what I really feel good about it is that each one of those people started to look at their lives from a different perspective. And they started to believe, and they started to read different things, and they started to reach out, and they started to realize that there is something bigger for them, and that they were stuck, in a place. And now all of a sudden, they're the leaders of the industry. And I'm sending 5 of them this week to Southern wholesalers. And I couldn't be prouder. I can't make it because I've got some health stuff going on. But the bottom line is that I could not be prouder to send those 5 people in there, because 5 years ago, the only person that was there was me, and they were asking me who we were. But the bottom line is that it's not about Everflow. It's really about each one of those people becoming somebody that's different. And I think I've taught them how to lead and how to give back. And at the end of the day, Hugh's had to up his game. So, I hired a business coach. I've got 2 business coaches now. I also had to take a look at myself and say, okay, where am I? And I did all this stuff. And so they used to call me an unconscious competent. I didn't really even know what I was doing, but once I started to break it down and develop the systems to go with it, that there is a system to success, that has me as excited as anything that I've ever been through, because I can, if you can take people and you can take companies through this, and they will be successful if they follow it. But at the end of the day, it's not anything that I've created. It really goes back to Earl Nightingale. Earl Nightingale's my guy, but Think and Grow Rich and Napoleon Hill. And then I just happened to be one of my mentors is Don Green of the Think and Grow Rich and Nightingale Conant Foundation. I met him about a year ago and went and spent time with him. And, he's coached me just to become a better person.
That's amazing. I mean, I think if you go back far enough, I think anything is just a regurgitation of something that Plato or Aristotle said,
Yeah.
So,
and you know what I learned in college, but I've really learned now, is that there's only 2, there's 2 ways to really change. Most people are working on all the symptoms, right? It's like, okay, we want the numbers. This is what we do. This is what, you need to do all that. And believe me, I believe that that's something that needs to be done. But if you start to work on the cause, when people are not succeeding, if they don't have results, there's usually a cause behind it. And it's usually an internal cause. And I think when we start working on the cause and we figure out what it is that's holding them back, they start to figure out where it's holding them back. And sometimes that cause is because they don't have a desire and they don't want more. That just means you have the wrong person in place. If you've got somebody that does have a desire and they do want more, but they don't know where to go to from here, as leaders and as companies, I think we all can step in and not only change cultures, but change people. Because if you think about the culture, as my coach would always say, Hugh, you know what culture is? And I'm like, well, what's that? It's just a group of people. And it's a group of people, and getting that group of people put in a position to start thinking differently, but also find the inner passion in the goal and whatever it is they want internally. So they're not just living somebody else's goals, they're living their own.
Love that. It sounds like people are at the real center of your model.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. That's why I call it people-based business. And listen, I feel like what I learned in college and what my teacher taught me was through repetition. So I think I think this as well, I think that we all come through life and we have a lot of baggage that we carry with us. And a lot of us don't know how to get rid of that baggage. So I'm a big conscious mind and unconscious mind person. Mm-hmm. Your conscious mind are the five highways we have that are coming in, touch, taste, see, hear. And we're getting hit with that every day. And so, we don't know a lot, but we're taking that in, whether we know it or not, good, bad, or indifferent, and we're sticking that in our unconscious mind. But I really think that we can change our unconscious mind. And if we're feeding the right information in there, and if we're doing it based on repetition, which is what my, teacher taught me, and we're putting the right thing in there on a regular basis, and you do it on a consistent basis, we can change the way that we think. One thing that I really do, and it works, is that when I go to bed at night, I have a 10-minute affirmation of, gratitude affirmation. And so I go through the day, and I thank, all the people within the day, and I thank, everybody that was there. And then I start thinking about the next day on how excited I'm going to be about doing certain things. And then what that does for you, what that really has done for me, is that it puts me in a position at night that I'm not thinking about all the stuff that I haven't done. I'm thinking about all the stuff that I want to do. And then when I wake up in the morning, I do the same thing. I thank my wife, whoever those people are, and I think about maybe one or two people that I can reach out to and just, show gratitude towards. But then I look at those 3 or 4 things that I want to do that day, and think about how excited I am to do that. And it's changed. It's just changed me so much. So you hear those people that can't get out of bed, in the morning, and we've all been there. But when you start to do the gratitude check, it changes that. And then it also changes your outlook. It's like usually my first meeting, it's, man, I just can't wait to get there. And I want everybody else to feel that same gratitude that I do, because I know that if I'm going in there with that gratitude, there's a pretty good chance that everybody else is going to be showing that gratitude as well. Mm-hmm. And it works. I mean, even this morning, I got up, I did my gratitude, whatever, and I opened the refrigerator, everything comes rolling out. And I'm making all kinds of noise, and I look at my wife, and I'm like, you know what? I think I overreacted to that one. I'll see you when I get back from my meeting. Yeah. And, it was like, how many times have you heard somebody that's gotten out of bed, stumped their toe, and then they had a bad rest of the day? So.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I think one of the hardest things in sales is, in dealing with like a sales turnaround, is dealing with the people. And if the people are stuck, if the people are not believing in themselves, that can be a really challenging place to be. I'm curious, what's your kind of process for trying to getting people to believe in themselves again?
Well, 2 things there. You asked me about the salespeople. And you're a consultant, and I think you're a really good one because I've checked you out. And some of the hardest ones are not the salespeople as much as it is the CEO or the COO that has a different type of mindset. And so that's a challenge in itself. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to salespeople, is that now I am somebody that's really high energy, and I really believe in people. But what I try to do is to spend a certain amount of time with each person to kind of figure out where they are, figure out where it is that they want to go. I have a process now. I didn't always do this process, but I've got a process now that takes them through, almost like a life script. Where is it that you want to go with your life, and what is it that you want to do, and how is it that you want to get there? And then what I do is a series of trainings with all of them to be able to take them through where we are as a team, but then try to do the individual trainings with them and figure out, okay, how can I help you through this? One of the biggest things that I've had to do is with most of these people is that they bring a certain amount of baggage. And if they've been stuck before and something starts to go sideways and it's not going well, I've had to make sure that they pick up the phone and have a conversation with me so that we understand that that's just part of the process, and have an understanding with them that it's probably the biggest opportunity that they have in sales is when something goes wrong, is when the company doesn't do something. And say, okay, now this is your opportunity, because if what we're trying to do is to just sell product, then we don't need you. This is the opportunity for you to make a big difference with you, but to go make a difference with the client. But then the other person you got to make a difference with is us, the company, and make sure that you're doing the right thing by the company. And so you're the one that's supposed to be pulling it all together. And because I've taught most, the ones that have done this, they're my top performers. And instead of getting all upset and sinking down into the negative side, they start to go to the positive side. And so that's one of the things that I've done with them that has really changed them. But it hasn't only changed them in business; it's starting to change their entire outlook, is with their personal life as well.
How do you thread that needle of, hey, things aren't going well. Say you got an underperforming rep, and an underperforming rep, you got to let them know that, like, hey, if this continues on for another month or 3 months or whatever it is, like, this is not going to be the job for you. How do you balance that with, like, keeping them motivated and excited?
I think you coach them up or you coach them out. So most people don't coach. Most of these people are out on their own. We throw them a catalog, and if they stick, great, and if they don't, the other 80% leave. And that's one of the retention issues that we have in every business. It doesn't matter. I just talked to a guy in manufacturing yesterday. He's got the same thing going on. But I think you coach them out and you coach them up, and you figure out, is this something that you really want to do? And is this something, maybe they're just not a good fit. And if they're not a good fit, have a conversation with them, and say, okay, we've got a certain amount of time to turn this around. And if we can't get it turned around, then I'm going to have to coach you out, and you're going to have to go find another place to be. Now, I'm not saying that you're not successful. You're just not successful here. Mm-hmm. I love that story because I didn't have anybody coaching me up, coaching me out. But when I was getting coached, I was just out. One day I was out. You listen to Mark Hunter, who, same thing. He was out. And what he did is he went and he figured out, he said, I got to do something differently. And same here. But I didn't have a Hugh Hornsby or a Mark Hunter, or I didn't have somebody there saying, I'm going to help you through it. But I'm a little different than a lot of people, because I read something on a leadership book the other day, and he said, you can't become close, with your salespeople. And I would say that that's the first part of leader. If you're going to write a leadership book, write one that the first person you have to become close with is with your salespeople. You don't need to, but it needs to be a business decision as well. Mm-hmm. And you need to be very clear on what needs to be done. So I've had to let, I've had to let a few go. And it's never fun, but you can have a different conversation and not make it ugly.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. I've heard you say that you want to get reps to think of themselves as part of the business. What's that? What does that mean to you?
Well, I think that I'm always saying that you want to become a part of something bigger than yourself. And if you look at the high performing entrepreneurs, and there's people that are high performing and they just learned how to make money. Mm-hmm. To me, it's all about giving back. And, it's about these people understanding that it's not just a customer relationship with a salesperson, but that it's a salesperson with a relationship at the highest level, so that we're all kind of working in this thing together. And so those guys are not out there. I mean, that's where my guys are not lone wolves. They're not just out there just trying to run numbers. We tell them exactly what we're trying to accomplish, they become you make them a bigger part of that. And now all of a sudden we're doing it together, and it's more of a team environment than it is, a lone wolf just trying to sell a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. We are not transaction-based people, even though my CEO is a transaction-based person. So we've had to integrate both of those. Mm-hmm. He's a big-time transaction. Everything I teach is usually, it's more of a bigger picture of what we're trying to create. But at the end of the day, it's about the numbers. So we've got to create numbers. We understand that. But the only way you create numbers is you create this you're doing the right actions, and the actions are making it work for those people that you're serving.
Mm-hmm. Last question for you. It seems like there's a balance of, companies by nature need to look out for what's best for the company, and people by nature need to look out for what's best for them. It's such an awkward thing to try and bridge. And I've heard you talk a lot about people first. And so how do you balance the two?
It's hard. It's hard sometimes. And I can't tell you how many times that I've defended people that I just wanted to give them a little bit more time. Mm-hmm. And when, when the numbers aren't making sense, you sometimes you have to let them go. But I can give you an example. Mm-hmm. And I'll even mention his name because I love this guy. Britt Thompson, and Britt will be thrilled that I mentioned his name. And so I was about a year ago. We had some things happen, and they told me, you need to go let these 4 people go. Now, I take that very serious. That's a serious thing. Mm-hmm. Not the way that I want it to do it, and I'm trying to help change these people's lives. And some of them I had to let go, but there were a couple that didn't. But Britt was one that I called and said, Britt, the numbers don't make sense, and I'm going to have to let you go. And he broke down in tears, and that just tore me up. And I said, but Britt, before I do that, I need to know something. Do you really want this? He said, I want this more. I just want this more than you ever know. And I said, okay. So I got off the phone. I thought about it. I called him up. I said, okay, I can work with that. If you really want this, I can work with that. Now we're going to have to change. You're going to have to change some things. Now you need to tell me you want this. He said, Hugh, I want this. I came here to work for you. And I'm like, well, I need you to change. And this is what I want you to do. I said, tomorrow morning, it starts now. You need to get up 1 hour earlier. You need to go to make one more call. You need to make one more visit, and you need to start doing it right now. And when you get to the end of your sales call, you need to go to wherever it is you need to get started the next day. And he did that. And his attitude changed. And because he did the one more, he's one of the top performers we have today. And it would have been a terrible thing for us to let him go. If I can find people that have the desire, if they don't have the desire, Colin, it doesn't work. But if they have the desire, I'll give them that second. I'll give them that next chance. Because what I see so many oftentimes is that, everybody usually wants to do a good job. Some of them just don't know how. Mm-hmm. And then when they start to get in that, that rut, what I call the negative side of it, all they're doing is just sinking their boats. But it's no different than me and you when we get, our attitudes start to go that way. Mm-hmm. If we don't change that attitude with a positive attitude, then all of it's doing, you're just going to keep going. But I've got to find people that want to change their attitude and that are willing to put the work in to make it happen. And I've had the ones that I've done the same thing with, and they didn't do it, and they just need it to go. And my big thing is, okay, go find a place that you can find something you really love to do. And so, in that case, it was a good one. There was a couple of the other cases that actually there were 2 cases that I did that, and then both of them are doing really well. At the end of the day, it is business, and you've got to take the personal side out of it at times, and I do understand that.
Mm-hmm. It's a
but
team
it's also
sport,
about
not
people.
a family, you know?
Yeah, that's right. But when somebody thinks that you care, I always say, do you care and love for your people? Do you care and love your people? That's what I always say. And people, they don't like that word love. Or do you people think that you're a transaction? Because if your people think that you're a transaction, you're going to get what's going on today in the business environment. They're going to go from one place to another. But if they're working within your company and they feel like they're really a part of something, I'm not saying they're not going to leave at some point because they've got a bigger opportunity in front of them. But when they leave for that bigger opportunity, they're leaving with something that most people could never, could never model. And they're leaving saying, okay, that is just a great company. That company really took care of me. And when you start having those conversations, it changes things. When people are leaving and saying they're idiots, they don't treat you well, and they don't do any of that, then all of a sudden everything that you're trying to build on the other side, we want people to leave, even if it's something that's not right for them. We want them to leave in a way that they feel like that we've done everything that we could to try to make them successful.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Hugh, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wisdom, your stories with us. If people are looking to get in touch, what's the best way for them to reach out?
It's Hugh.Hornsby, HORNSBY at Hugh.HornsbyBC.com is the best way. Now I've got a website that's coming up probably over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and actually launching a business to go with that. And it's all going to be about exactly what we just talked about. And the other part of it is, how can I help business owners and some of those people that are going through the same issues to figure out how they can create a stronger culture within their organization.
Love that. Well, thank you so much. We'll throw a link to your website and your LinkedIn in the show notes. If anybody's looking to get in touch, they can feel free to reach out. Thank you again, Hugh. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for everything you do. Let me know how I can help you.
Will do.
And if you'd like me to do an introduction with Dave, I'd be more than glad to do that.
Love it. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll catch you all next week.